Hello, hello. I'm super excited to do our very first true crime episode. It's going to be awesome because we're going to have so many really amazing cases that are coming up once a month, the last Thursday of every month. We picked your case this month. So, who are we talking about?
The Idaho 4.
I don't know why I am the biggest true crime junkie fanatic, and this is why we're doing this episode, is because I don't really remember much about this case at all.
Really?
Mm-mm. No, like, when you were like, "Oh, I know what I wanna do for the first episode, it's gonna be the Idaho." I'm like, "What is she talking about?" Like, I remember seeing it on, like, the
Mhm.
news and the media and stuff, but I don't know, it just never I don't know, it was never a thing.
Yeah, it's one that I as soon as it hit the TV and, like, all the media, I was like, "Holy crap." It just sucked me in from the get-go, and I have up until, like, probably 6 months ago, I followed it religiously, and then I kind of fell off following it 'cause a lot wasn't happening with it.
Mhm. I think that's a huge
Yeah.
issue. Like, I was deep diving, of course, like, the last couple weeks, and
Mhm.
it's weird because with social media, I think with true crime, we all feel like we're our own little, like, CSI, private detectives, but with that comes conspiracies, and I think that's really important to talk about, and that's why we're doing these episodes once a month. It's gonna be a different, true crime case, but when we're talking about the Idaho 4, there's a lot of conspiracies. There's a lot of chit-chat and
Mhm.
talk about, like, what could be, what was released, what's true, what's false. And just as a trigger warning, it's very difficult for victims and victims' families to hear this kind of stuff because it's something that they never truly get justice. And it's really hard with this case for me to like talk about because there's four students that were the victims. So there's four separate families that have to endure this and go through this.
Mhm. Yeah, and one of them, like, I feel like Ethan's family has been very quiet.
Mhm.
Xana's family has been very quiet. I think Kaylee's family has been the most outspoken of all of them.
Mhm. Mhm. So it's kind of wild. So for those that may be listening and they hi are on the same bandwagon as I was of like, who are the Idaho 4? Like what's going on? You're like the guru on this one. So let's do a little
Mhm.
recap of what is the Idaho 4 story that we're touching on today.
So the Idaho 4, it was 4 college students in Moscow, Idaho, who were tragically and, like, brutally murdered in their college campus, home in, November of 2022.
Mhm.
Um, and there were 2 other students living in the home as well at the time of the murder, but they were not, murdered. They were apparently sleeping and weren't bothered, and they didn't hear anything either, allegedly.
Mhm. When we came up with this idea of like doing a true crime episode like once a month, it's awesome because like we're really good friends. True crime is like our thing. I mean, trust me, when
Mhm.
we say we talk on all social media platforms about true crime, we do. Like we'll send an Instagram message and then we'll send a TikTok and then we're texting and then we're on Snapchat. Like we're covering all bases on social platforms of talking about true crime. But it's great because you're like the very energetic, like, oh my gosh, did you hear this? What do you think of this? And, like, I'm the factual of, like, "Okay, I'm deep diving into this." Like, I'm going down this dark rabbit hole. It's probably why I don't sleep. It's probably why I have nightmares when I do, but
You're
this
the logical side of it, and I'm the, like, "Oh my god."
there's gonna be some logical explanations and little things, especially when it comes to the conspiracy theories, because
Yep.
this case is wild to me. Like, it's just wild.
Mhm.
So, it took 7 weeks for the suspect, Brian, to be arrested. 7 weeks after the murder,
Mm.
which Moscow, Idaho is a small town and like everybody's panicking. College students, are just wondering, is this somebody that's living next door? Or is this somebody that I know? And the wild thing to me with this case was there's still no link. Like there's still no motive of
Mm-mm.
why this individual murdered these four students. There's no connection. There's no link whatsoever, which is like me being the logical one. Like, what the hell? Like, I need
Yeah.
answers.
Yeah, that's what's weird to me is they've tried really hard to try and figure out what is the leak. Did he know them? Did he follow them on social media? Did he go to college with them? Did he work with them? Like, there's
Mhm.
nothing.
And this guy, like, when we say the epitome of odd, whew,
Creepy.
um, crazy. So he was a criminology graduate. For those that don't know, he did kind of the back end research, and everyone within his campus, because he did go to Washington State. He was there pursuing a PhD. And a lot of the students there, 2 to 3 weeks before the murders happened, they raised red flags. He was actually terminated because he was a teacher's assistant, and he was terminated for his level of unprofessional conduct with women. There were numerous women on that campus that reported him, stating that they were getting kind of uneasy feelings, they were uncomfortable. And there was one female that even went so far as to report that he was stalking her and
Mhm,
following her to her car.
mhm.
Like when you see, when I say that, I'm like, chills. Like, that's just creepy because we don't know what's coming up. Obviously, there's like no crystal ball, but he was weird. Like, that guy was flat out weird. And people started to see the shift 2 to 3 weeks before the murders happened.
Yeah, and the college that he went to was only, I think, 10 to 12 minutes from
Mhm.
the Idaho college that the students that were murdered went to. So, while it was in another state, it was literally only 10 to 12 minutes from that college campus. They kinda called them, like, sister colleges, I believe is what they called them at one point,
Mhm.
because they were so close. Like, the students from both colleges kind of migrated and intertwined with one another.
Yeah, and they had an investigator. They were able to leak the information. It was noted, and they're not releasing which female it was to, but he had messaged DMs, slid into
Mhm.
those DMs, one of the victims, stating, "Hey,
Yep.
how are you?" Never received a response, but then continuously kept messaging her. So
Yeah.
my logical brain is, okay, like where was the connection? How'd you find her Instagram? Because it's something we need to talk about. We are sharing our lives, every little detail on social media, which gives me the creeps. I'm like, "Oh my god, like who's watching me?" That's why I like don't post like where I'm at until I've like long left that
Left.
location.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I do the same. I try not to post where I'm at when I'm there. I try to post it once I'm gone. Unless I'm with someone that I know can handle a situation if it gets bad.
Mhm. Yeah. And then even, like, when you look at him, so I remember when they were showing, like, how like, that moment that he was being extradited, the judge specifically asked him, "Do you have any, like, mental capacity, any mental health issues that we need to be aware about that it would cause you to not be extradited?" And the guy, Brian, looked at the judge and was like, "No, there's no remorse, there's nothing
Mhm.
in that man." Like, oh god. The justice system has their hands full with this one.
Yeah, I feel like throughout the entire ever since he's been arrested, he's just stone-faced, no emotion, no expression, no empathy, no sympathy, no anything, and it's just
Mhm.
like he's just stonewalled the whole time. Every time he's been in court, every time he's seen, he's just stone-faced.
Mhm. Mm. And it's interesting because, like I said in the beginning, there like no motive has ever been outlined. And that's something
Mhm,
where I think so many people are talking about this case because there's no connection. And normally,
mhm,
it does take a little bit of time for that connection to kind of come out, but there still isn't one. And it's
mhm.
creepy to me because 5 days after the murders were like taken through, he received a new license plate for his car
Yep.
because his vehicle was seen there, which is part of the conspiracy theory of the time and the time that things happen. Or we'll dive into that. But when you think of everything that kind of happened leading up to it and then right after, he was in a criminology case that talked about, or a criminology class.
Course. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was talking about like DNA and how crucial things were being left behind. And everybody said in that class that he was very much just like ecstatic to talk about
Mhm,
DNA, to talk about evidence, to talk about lingering things in the criminology justice system. And when you look at that, not very much was left behind at that crime scene.
mhm. Not very much at all.
Mm-mm,
Yeah.
mm-mm.
Um, he I think what the only thing that was left behind was the knife sheath,
Mhm.
and I think that was it.
Mhm.
Yeah,
But
and
the
it's
police
just
department is showing, like, they spent hours and hours, and it keeps changing because they stated they took over 4,000 photos, and they took a lot of different things in regards to, like, evidence within the crime scene, but that was, like,
mhm,
directly following the murders, and things have kinda just filtered out, and there's not a lot being discussed about, like, remaining evidence.
mhm,
Everything's kind of lock and key with this case.
mhm. Yeah, and I wonder why that is. I've always wondered that because I remember seeing on TikTok when they first started taking things out of the house,
Mhm.
I remember seeing the mattresses and, like, the dressers that they were taking out of the house and the amount of blood that was on the mattresses because they had, like, covers on them, but you could still see it, and it was just like I mean, it was unbelievable, the
Mhm.
amount of blood that was on these mattresses. I mean, they were just, like, soaked.
Hmm. Of course, that brings me to that conspiracy. Conspiracy number 1 for today's very special episode. One of the parents, of one of the victims, they were talking about how they were told that their daughter had passed, that she was in her
Mhm,
bed, that she was slumped over. First, they were all told from the police department and investigators that all of the students passed while sleeping. They were all
mhm,
asleep. Well, now there's
mhm,
different stories that are coming up, even from the
mhm,
victims' parents.
mhm.
One of the parents stated that their daughter's room was very, very small, and her bed literally overtook the entire room.
Yep.
So, them stating that the perpetrator opened the door and stabbed her, they showed defensive wounds on her from the coroner. And their parents are now speaking up saying that was not even possible in the size space of her room, let alone to have her and another girl in the bed with her and to have three people in the room. That room was not big enough for that.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that the 2 girls that were on the 3rd floor, Kaylee and Maddie, that were on the 3rd floor together asleep in I believe it was Maddie's room because Kaylee had already moved out of the house. She was just back visiting, getting a few things,
Hmm.
um, and they were asleep in Maddie's room, which is where the knife sheath was found, and, I don't know that they've said which girl had the defensive wounds, but it's said that, he killed both of them in that bed, and they were fighting back, so it's like,
Hmm.
if that room was as tiny as said, it's it kind of is odd that, one parent is saying that the room was too small for 3 people to even really be in it, plus her bed because it took up the whole room, and the police are saying that they fought back, so
Hmm. The other part is the house that they were living in was technically like a tri-level. There were 3 floors.
Mhm,
And with 4 victims, I don't know, this is where my logical brain kind of starts going, and I'll get your take on this, but in the time frame that they're stating that all 4 of the murders happen, that's a lot of levels to get through, to murder
mhm,
4 people, to not obviously have a lot of neighbors, a lot of sounds, a lot of witnesses, stuff like that. That's a lot for one person to do in a matter of the short time span that they're stating it occurred. Do you agree?
mhm. I do, but I don't at the same time because the way that the house, because 'cause I've looked at this house, I don't even know how many times.
Mhm,
I remember going on Zillow before they took the pictures down
mhm,
and screenshotting every room in the house, going on MapQuest and getting or not MapQuest, but Google Maps and getting the pictures of the house before they blurred them out and everything because they did that very quickly. Google
mhm,
Earth blurred out the photos of the house, within the d 1 to 2 days after it happened, 2 to 3
mhm,
days after it happened. Zillow took down the pictures of the house within days. Um, so I remember going on and getting the pictures very quickly because I was like, "I wanna see how this house is laid out because it was laid out very weird. So, like, your first level had 2 bedrooms on the base level with the ground level, which is where they parked their cars. The second level, which is where they believe that he went in the back door, went into the kitchen, which is where they believe he went in, was the kitchen.
Mhm.
and then it led into, like, the living room kind of area, and then you went through the living room sort of area back into a bedroom, which is where they believed Ethan and Xana was. And then when you came out of the kitchen and went into that living room area, there were stairs that went up, and then on that 3rd level was 2 small bedrooms and a very small bathroom.
Mhm.
And I remember just looking at it, and if he went into the kitchen and immediately went upstairs to that 3rd level, and because they said that, um, Kaylee's dog was in her room.
Mhm.
So that's where they believe that the one roommate that wasn't harmed heard the dog barking and thought the girls were playing with the dog. So it's believed that he was stalking one of the girls because he had been by the house, I believe, 12 times
Mhm.
prior to the murders. Because they had like pinged his phone and checked his phone records and things like that. So he was I believe he was stalking the house, checking the layout of the house. I mean, he could have went on Zillow just as well as anybody else and looked at the layout of the house.
Mhm.
So I think he immediately knew where he was going. He knew which girl lived in what, maybe not which girl lived in which room, but he knew the layout of the house.
Mhm.
So he immediately went upstairs, you know, committed the murder of the 2 girls upstairs, immediately went back downstairs. And at that point, they say that Xana had received, a DoorDash order. So he probably heard her back there and knew that they were awake, or at least one person was awake, went back there and took them out, and then he was out. I believe it's possible just because, they say anything is possible, and I think maybe he caught them, Xana that was awake caught her completely off guard,
Mhm.
and even though Ethan was a big guy, if you've looked at Brian, he was a big guy too. He
Yeah.
wasn't a small person. So, I think he could have easily caught them off guard. And I believe they said he was in the house for 14 minutes.
Mhm.
Um, it sounds like a long time or not a long time. But in the sense of catching people off guard with a knife and 2 that are sleeping and, you know, young, drunk college kids, you have to remember these kids were out drinking prior to this too.
Yeah.
So they're not at their best, they're not at their strongest. I think it's possible. I really do.
It's interesting because when you were saying, 14 minutes seems like a long time, but then again, it doesn't. I just looked up our recording timer, and we've only been on for 18 minutes. So when we're looking at this, that is 14 minutes of us chit chatting, you guys listening for 14 minutes, and then a
Mhm,
4-minute time span difference of getting in a car and leaving. I mean,
mhm,
it is a lot of time, but then it isn't. It's weird. There's a lot of different audios from neighbors, ring cameras and things that
mhm,
were picked up. And there is one that you can hear Xana, and she's, stating a lot of different things in that. The very first thing she says is, "Who are you?" So
mhm,
it's interesting to me because a lot of the things that are being shown are there was no signs of forced entry. I think a lot of
mhm,
people are really shocked by that because they're like, when we think of no forced entry and we think of, true crime stories, it's usually, oh, they knew the perpetrator. I can't even tell you how many times in college I didn't have my door locked. I would come
yeah,
home from a night drinking or hanging out with friends, or I had my hands full of, grocery bags or whatever, and I just didn't lock my door. And I think
yeah,
that's something we need to kind of really think about because I think a lot of conspiracy theories come with that of, oh, well, there was no forced entry, so they must have let this person in. They knew this person. Well,
mhm.
Xana had DoorDash, so maybe she was expecting, just to open and shut the door, nothing. There's a lot of different like aspects that kind of go into that, but I always remind people, how many times do you guys not lock your door? Come
And
on.
again, they were 6 technically if you include the other ones, 6 drunk college kids that just come home and it's 4 a.m. They
Mhm.
probably just forgot to lock their door,
Yeah. I don't think they were
you
like,
know?
"Oh, make sure to lock the door tonight." Like, that's not
Yeah,
something that's probably
right.
went through their mind.
I
So
mean, I'm 36 years old and I still sometimes come in and it's, I'm laying in bed at 10 o'clock, and I'm like, "Oh, shit, did I lock my door?" And I get up
Mhm.
and I go check, and my door's not locked,
Yeah.
and I'm not drunk, I'm sober as shit. So,
Yeah.
it's very easy to have that happen. I don't think that that is, like that's something people focused on in the
Mhm.
beginning is there was no forced entry, and it's like, I mean, my door's not locked right now, somebody could come in here and it's the middle of the day, I
Mhm.
mean, it happens.
When we look at true crime stories, there's a lot that don't have a forced entry. I mean, I remember even growing up, the big one that I think kind of made that tipping point of no forced entry was the John Benet Ramsey case. There was no forced entry, and
Mhm.
look at what happened with that one.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I think, yeah,
And
people focused on that.
yeah, and I mean, they lived in a nice, super expensive, area, and it's like, those are the people that are supposed to lock their doors.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
So another mystery. The coroners. There's a huge thing right now that's been going around for a while, and it's the coroner's description of the wounds on a victim. And this is in regards to Ethan. His autopsy was done on November 17th, but the report of his passing did not come out until December 15th. A lot of people are stuck on this, like, oh, there was such this long delay. Well, it's a very intricate case.
Mhm.
But I think what's going on right now is that per the court's documents, the wounds differ from floor to floor on victims. And this is bringing up that conspiracy case and question of this is showing that there may have been multiple weapons used. There may have been knives, being plural, used, which brings
Mhm.
in the question of multiple suspects, multiple perpetrators. Do you what do you think on this? Do you think there were multiple or you think he did it on his own?
I think he did it on his own. I think he is the type of person just by, the Reddit post that he also did,
Mhm.
asking the questions for his class that he was in. I think he is that type of person to what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of the word.
He likes the attention to know that he did it on his
Yes.
own.
Yes, he
Mhm.
wants the gratification of knowing that he's the one who did all of this on his own.
Mhm.
I don't think he would've asked for help, A, and B, I think the gratification of getting it done all on his own
Mhm.
would be super satisfying for him.
Mhm.
And the multiple weapons, I can see that, but I also can't. The thing with the different wounds is where I think it was so brutal, maybe the knife got, um like, the knife broke, so
Mhm.
the wounds are different, that's a possibility as well that I've thought of.
Mhm.
Like, the end of the knife may have broke, and so it changed the way the knife was shaped, so that's always a possibility as well because it was so brutal.
Yeah. I wonder too if the victims, if they were fighting back. I mean, some were sleeping and then then now they're stating some had defensive wounds. That
Mhm,
can change the trajectory of a weapon on a
mhm,
victim in regards
mhm,
to if there is force from the victims in defending themselves and, there is a struggle, stuff like that. So I don't know. The more I kind of look into it, I'm like, maybe he had somebody help him. But then I'm like you. I mean, those Reddit questions were so disgusting of
mhm.
the questions that he would ask. He tried to tie everything into the criminology of, for his PhD, but he knew what he was doing. I mean,
Yeah, I did.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
And asking people like, how did you feel before you, went to kill somebody? And did you plan that? It's just disgusting. Just absolutely disgusting of what came out.
Mhm. And it's like nobody else in the class put out anything like that, so why did he?
Mhm. Another red flag trigger, weirdo.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing with that is I know when they stopped him from traveling from Idaho back to Pennsylvania where he was captured or not captured, but where he was caught and arrested,
Oh, he was
he had
captured. He was captured. He was taken down, captured, and extradited. Yes, that word
Yeah.
captured. That was a freak, and he was captured.
Yeah, people kept trying to zoom in on his wrist right here where they thought he had a defensive wound himself.
Hmm.
I don't know about that. I zoomed in and zoomed out and looked and looked and looked at that picture, and I'm like, you can't tell anything about that, and looking at his
Mm-mm.
hands, it's like it's so blurry and it's so grainy, and it's just, like, there's no telling on that police, body cam footage
Mhm.
what that is. It's like, that's a stretch for me.
Yeah. They did a search warrant on his house, and they pulled like a lot of evidence. When I'm diving into that, I don't know why, but there's like one item, which is probably weird because I don't even think it's like that big of a thing. But they took 63 items, and from the home, from his car, they got a shop vac that was used in his car and used
Mhm.
in his home. I don't know why, but like so many people, they're not talking about. I want to know what's in that shop vac because that was one of their number one things in evidence that they have not released the
I don't
contents.
know, I didn't hear that, I didn't hear anything about the shop vac.
Yeah, and I'm like, my weird brain is like, okay, I'm OCD. I'm like super clean. What's in that shop vac? I
Yeah,
want to know. Like, I want to know.
yeah.
I think it's weird.
And one other thing I remember them getting from his apartment in Washington was a hair, and
Hmm.
they think it was a dog hair. It wasn't a human hair, it was a dog hair, and they compared it to they didn't say it was the same, but they compared it to Kaylee's dog,
Hmm.
which was a golden doodle, and they said it was very similar, but they have never confirmed that it was the same. And I'm like, if they can just test that and confirm it was the same, I mean, what are we waiting on? Like, what are you doing?
What is in that shop vac? What were you vacuuming up to clean? Because we all know you
Yeah.
cannot clean the inside out when it comes to evidence on that. Like, you just cannot.
Yeah. And there's certain cracks and crevices in cars that you just will never get clean
Yeah.
unless you take seats out and you remove like everything. Like you got to take the
Hmm.
whole seat out to get certain areas clean. And he didn't do that. He didn't have time.
No, he had to go on a journey with his dad to drive back to Pennsylvania. The body cam is so awkward. Do you think his dad had any idea?
I I don't. I really don't. I again think he wanted the gratification of knowing in his head that he had done this and nobody knew about it but him. I don't think his dad knew because his dad was like,
His dad was
like,
hella awkward.
yeah,
From the conversations
mhm,
to
mm,
just his demeanor, facial expressions
mhm.
on the body cam, it's almost like a kid that steals candy from a store and, like, they have to tell you, like, "Oh, this was the clerk's color of her dress, and this is the shoe I wore." Like, he just gave a lot of weird information when because they got pulled over repeatedly. Because I mean,
Twice.
obviously
Yeah, I think
yeah,
it was twice.
the cops were looking for this vehicle, and again, he got a new license plate on the car 5 days after, but the
Yeah.
dad was like, "Oh, we've been driving for hours, and this" like, I don't know, to me,
I don't think
something
his dad could keep it a secret.
I don't know, something in my gut tells me, like, his dad may have not have known this whole, like, complete spectrum, but I think something you can't be sitting in the car that long and have absolutely no conversations, like, what, about the weather? About your tire pressure gauge? Like, something I don't know. I got a weird feeling about that.
I don't know. He seems like the type of narcissistic person that just would not tell a soul. Like, he was waiting to get caught so that he could be like, I did
Mhm,
this, and you had no idea.
mhm. So, they did, demolish, and remove the house. I think it's a very good thing in regards to giving justice and a little bit of peace and just respect to the families, the victims' families, because this has become such a huge case that I think it's kind of put this town in the spotlight, but it also has created like a tourist attraction of this home, and the campus did not want that for the families. I love that they're
Mhm.
going to allow students to be a part of a rebuild project in that space, but then I also think like, okay, like it always makes me nervous like when things like that happen because it's like, did you get every little tiny piece of evidence that could have possibly been there? Because like, you don't have an option to go back.
See, I think they should have waited till after it
Mm-hmm.
was all said and done. The fact that they tore it down already is infuriating to me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think they should have waited because what if there was still something there? What if there was still a tiny fiber or a hair or anything could still have been there? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, It just to me, it was premature, it was done too early, I don't agree with it. I think they should have waited until the trial is completely said and done. He was convicted, not convicted, hopefully, that doesn't happen, sentenced, put away, and then do it. I understand why they want to, I agree with why they want to. I think they did it too soon.
Mhm.
I
They did
don't I don't like it.
yeah, they did give the families, like, the belongings,
Mhm,
obviously, but the
mhm,
number one thing that the families have not received back, which I find really interesting, are the final photos of the last moments on their children's phones. And that's wild to me because obviously being in college, phones are attached. They're like Velcro, and every single
mhm,
second of our lives is documented through selfies, photos,
mhm.
pictures. And it's because we have literally like a walking digital timestamp in our hands all the time with our phones. The families are very upset that they're not getting this information because they want to know what kind of photos there are. And that is under lock and key with investigators, which makes me question what are on those cell phones?
It's a good question. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it makes you wonder if Xana was still awake on her phone because she was again, they said she was on TikTok. So, was something captured on those phones in those final moments? Was the killer's picture taken on those phones in those final moments? N We don't know. Because that leads me back to um, what is her name from Arizona, from Mesa, Arizona, that
Oh,
case.
Jodi Arias.
Jodi Arias with the
Mhm,
photos when she dropped the camera
mhm.
and took the photos accidentally.
Yep, because
That
that was
leads
in the
me
washing
straight.
machine. Uh-huh.
Mhm. So, that that's another case that is she got herself caught
Mhm.
with that, and that was kind of what they called the smoking gun, that put her away.
She's
So
another
there could
weirdo.
oh lord, that's one we'll have to cover.
We will for
But
sure. I remember
yeah,
living in Arizona. I remember that popping up, and I
yeah, because 'cause
remember a
we've
lot
talked
of
about that.
things. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe that'll be the next
yeah.
one.
Because, I mean, how many times you're on Snapchat and you accidentally try to, like, lock your phone and it takes a screenshot and somebody's like, "Why did you screenshot that?" And you're like, "I
Mhm,
didn't need to,"
mhm.
So, there's a very good possibility that something like that might be on their phones.
Yep. Well, his defense attorney, I understand, she is following all of his rights, following the law, and I get it. But there is such a delay in this trial, which is
Mhm,
so sad. They were trying to do a summer 2024 trial, and the defense is stating that that's not realistic. So they were trying to push it to 2025. When you're looking at a passing of November of 2022 when they passed, and you're looking at how far the trial is being delayed,
mhm.
but it's interesting because she stated that they have 51 terabytes of evidence collected by investigators. For
A
those
lot.
that are not like techie, me being one included, for 1 terabyte, that can hold 250,000 photos. For 1 terabyte, they have 51 terabytes of photos and videos and everything they have to go through. And it was interesting because it was leaked that they had 400 potential witnesses, and they have spoken to less than 10% of those so far. 400 witnesses. Now, are all of those legitimate? Never know. It's part of why you question and do all that stuff. But
Mhm.
400 witnesses? There should be no reason that we are literally sitting here with all these conspiracies, like for the time of, this ring camera, the time that this vehicle was seen on Linda Lane. There's just too much that's just not going together in sync, I guess, for my
Mhm,
logical brain.
mhm.
And there's been over 9,000 tips to the FBI since the murders occurred, and they're still happening. That's
Yeah.
scary. That's a lot of information, not only for the prosecution to go through, the investigators, the FBI, there's a lot in this, but that chills me when we're talking about a trial from a defensive standpoint because I wonder, is there going to be a crack in there that he's going to not, because this is a death penalty case, the state's,
Mhm.
is there going to be something in there that just throws this case completely sideways?
It is a good question because you never know. I mean, I can't even imagine trying to sit and go through that much evidence. That's
Mhm.
overwhelming to me to hear. I know when I have to sit down and, like, download my pictures from my phone and put them, like, to my computer to make space, there's, like, 3,000 photos. I'm like, "This is gonna take all day. I don't
It's
have time for
grueling.
this."
Mhm.
It's exhausting, it's overwhelming. I'm like, "Oh my god, I don't wanna do this." I can't imagine 51 terabytes, like,
Mhm.
that's, like, millions upon millions upon millions of photos and videos, and that doesn't include the physical evidence,
Mhm.
the like you said, the tips, the witnesses that you also have to question, like and you have to think these prosecutors and defense attorneys and things, they're not this is not their only case. They have other cases that they're working as well.
Mhm.
So this is not their only focus. It just I don't props to them for even taking it on.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, he was indicted on 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count felony of burglary, and he was given a no contact order for the victims' families. But this oh, ooh, when I read this, I was like, "You gotta be kidding me!" For the 2 surviving, because there are 2 that were in this that a lot of people don't talk about, which I
Mhm,
understand. Um, but he was given a no contact order for the 2 survivors for 2 years. 2 years. That's it. That should be a lifetime no contact.
it should, yeah.
Absolutely not. 2 years.
Mhm,
Mm, mm,
yep.
mm.
Well,
S
and I believe one of them, um, decided to actually sit down with his attorney at one point
Mhm.
and talk to them, did she not?
Yeah, she's chosen to speak. It's something that I don't think the prosecution, like, really wanted that to happen, but, I mean,
Mhm,
I kinda see both. I mean, when we're talking about a death penalty case, there's gonna be a lot of witnesses on the stand, there's gonna be a lot of cross-examination. Um, I mean, that's something it's wild to me because there's always that, that picture, that photo that they're showing for the Idaho 4, and it shows all 4 of the victims. I never realized for quite a while that there were 2 surviving victims within that
mhm.
house. They're in that photo.
They're in
They're
that
on
photo, yeah.
each side that the media has
Mhm.
cropped them completely out, and when you look at how the media presented that, you never would have known that that was cropped.
Yeah. I've seen the uncropped photo too, like,
Mhm.
when it first happened, that photo went out in the very beginning uncropped, and they're in that photo. So, if you followed it from the beginning, you've seen that photo with them in it several times.
Mhm.
And it's and it also came out that one of the surviving victims, um, or surviving roommates saw the guy.
Yeah.
And then so you have that whole conspiracy of how did she see him without him seeing her? And how did she see him and not, not end up murdered as well? And it's so you have all of those conspiracy things and questions. And it's just like he may have been so focused on where he wanted to go that he just didn't see her. And again, like I said up in the beginning, I have looked at this house and the inside of it and the pictures so many times that the way the house is laid out on the inside, it would be very easy for him to kind of, like if he's so focused on where he's wanting to go, he could
Mhm.
easily have just walked right past her. If she I mean, she could have had her door cracked, very small and
Mhm.
saw him, and he could have walked right past it in a pitch black house and not even noticed.
Mhm.
So again, it is possible. I feel like people are so quick to say, "Well, if she saw him, then he had to have seen her, so she was in on it."
Yeah.
That's not always true. I don't buy that.
I don't either. Because they say, I mean, in her statement, she recalls seeing a figure clad in black clothing and a mask. We're talking around, by the time everything is said and done, they're talking about around 4:20, 4:25 AM. I don't know about
Mhm.
y'all, but, in my house at 4:20 in the morning, I can't see shit in my
It's
house. It is
pitch black, yeah.
dark. It's
Yeah.
dark.
Yeah, and the
So
thing is, he came in from outside where there were possibly streetlights because it's in an apartment. There's an apartment complex next door. I think
Mhm.
there's 2 actually close by, so there's streetlights. Her eyes are adjusted to their house being dark at night.
Mhm.
His are not. He came in from somewhat light outside into a pitch black house. His eyes aren't adjusted to that, so he's not gonna see shit.
Mhm.
You also
Yep.
have to consider that.
Because
I mean, how
everyone's
many
like,
times do you come in from outside at you're coming in from wherever at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's pitch black in your house, and you come in and your front porch light is on, and you walk into your pitch black house, you're like, "Damn, I can't see a fucking thing in here."
mhm. Mhm.
You know?
'Cause
It's
everyone's
the
like, "How
same
did they
thing.
not make eye contact? How did you not see his eyes?" Okay, well, he had a black mask on, so when you're looking at a perpetrator with a mask, you're
Mhm.
trying to take everything in, plus you're in a dark house, and so you have the
You're
shadow.
terrified.
Yes, and then you have adrenaline of, "Oh my god, there's somebody in our house." You don't know what those I mean, they're starting to get some leaked things out, but we really don't know what they overheard because when
Mhm.
you're woken up, you hear something like that, the barking dog. They thought that the girls were playing with the dog. Then they hear screaming, then they hear crying, and then they hear somebody saying, "I'm going to help you." You don't know that I mean, if I heard something like that in college, I wouldn't know that there was somebody in my house and there was this traumatic event going on because there were, Xana and Ethan, there were couples in there. There were people that were best friends in there. So you're not processing all of that in the moment. And I think that's where a lot of kind of these out of control conspiracies are coming from because people
Mhm.
are just thinking, like, we know all the details after, but like in that moment, plus, like you said, alcohol is involved. You don't know what was going on or what was heard.
Mhm. I mean, if I heard my friends, who I thought were 2 best friends, had been best friends since they were children, laughing, playing with the dog barking, and then screaming, like, I would've thought they were just being drunk, crazy
Mhm.
best friends, you know? Depending on the level of screaming, I think, but then again, you never know. And then you go to the couple, with I mean, they could have been having sex. You never know. Shit like that
Mhm.
gets out of out of control and wild. Who
Mhm.
knows? You don't know that level of what they're doing and how that goes. And so you have to think of all possibilities and not just jump to, well, this is what I would have done. Well,
Right.
you've never been in that situation, so you don't know what you would have done. I don't know what I would have done. More than likely, I would have stayed in my bedroom with my door locked and not even opened my door, scared
Mhm.
shitless, probably till daylight, like they
Mhm.
apparently did, or laid in my bed terrified until I fell asleep and then woke up at whatever time, and then left my bedroom to see what was going on and then found what they found. I mean,
Yep.
I'm the type of person, if I hear something in my house, I mean, I live
Mhm.
in the country, I have a weapon. More than likely, I'm still not gonna leave my bedroom even though I have a weapon,
Mhm.
'cause it just not gonna happen, but I probably would have fell back asleep terrified just as well as they did.
Mhm. I'm a dog mom, and I know you are too. The dog barking and this all occurring in like very quick amount of time for
Mhm,
me, for 4 people. I really wonder because she was very connected to that dog. That dog was her life.
mhm, yep,
I wonder what happened in that room with that dog and with that perpetrator. There's something weird with that. I don't know why, but I mean, granted, I have Frenchies. Do I think that they would like become like German Shepherd guard dogs in that moment? Probably not. No, probably
well, the
not.
dog was in a separate room,
Hmm.
in with the door shut, so the dog wasn't even with them.
But when there's a huge connection with a dog and
Yeah,
their owner to hear things. That dog had to have been going off. Something had to have been they're
mhm,
very instinctual. Because that's the weird part to me where neighbors is like, "Well, we didn't really hear anything, but then we started hearing things around this time when we did the noise complaints." I don't know. Something with
yeah,
that just makes me wonder, like, what
mhm,
happened in that house?
mhm, yeah, like, the dog should have been going more crazy than he was.
Especially being separated, hearing the owner screaming, crying, whatever was going on. There had to have been dogs are gonna react when they hear and they instinctually feel something with their owner is going on.
Mhm,
They're gonna start making noise. They're gonna start wreaking havoc, especially when they are separated from a wall from their owner. That's just my opinion on that.
yeah, yeah,
So, so with this case, in your opinion, because you followed this from A1 day one versus
Mhm.
me being a little bit later. I'm interested to hear both of our kind of ideas. What do you think happened?
I mean, I think that for whatever reason, he because Kaylee had been complaining of a stalker, prior to this. So and if you've seen pictures of her, she's a beautiful, beautiful girl.
Mhm.
I think that he was infatuated with her for whatever reason. He saw her again, these colleges are 10, 20, or 10 to 12 minutes apart from one another. I think he saw her somewhere, whether it was at her job, o on campus, driving by, somewhere. He saw her somewhere, found her on social media, whatever, became infatuated with her, started stalking her, and tried to reach out to her, and she shut him down, wanted no part of it. He became angry and for whatever reason decided to put in motion his plan, and I don't know why he took out 4 of them, but I think he went in and he had a plan, and he thought about it, and it was premeditated, and he killed all 4 of them by himself,
Mhm.
and then he made the plan to go back across country like nothing ever happened.
Yeah. I know, like, living in the area that I do, I have a lot of people, like, suggested posts based on, like, locations that I've been to and, like, things I've tagged
Mhm.
and stuff that come
Yep.
up on, like, the explore page on, Instagram. So, I personally think that that's how he found her because I think that there was some link of, like I said,
Mhm.
location or something like that. I think he found her very attractive. I think he reached out, like you said, he reached out numerous times as it's been shown. She made
Mhm.
no contact. And I think from there, he followed her on social media because she's in college. And, as women, we know we post a lot. I mean, I post way too much sometimes. I think then he started almost feeling like he knew her. And when there was no type of interaction in return, I think that upset him, mixed with
Mhm.
him getting, terminated from his teacher assistant position due to misconduct with women. I think it all just kind of boiled up and came together where he just thought he was this fantastic, criminology student going to get his PhD. He knew everything about everything. And I think it just something snapped. I think he went there obviously premeditated from everything that's showing. I don't know. I don't think that he went in thinking that he would kill all of them.
I
I
don't either.
I think that he went to have some form of contact with her. I think that he was probably shocked at how many people were in the house. And I think that probably something ensued within the house that he didn't necessarily plan on. And it was easier in that moment just to murder them because they
Mhm.
had seen too much. They just knew too much. That's my take on it. But now seeing all of the stuff that's coming up with the trial and all of the information that is not being given by the defense, I feel like there's going to be a turn. I feel like they've got something up their sleeve that nobody is expecting.
Yeah. Yeah, I do too. I think there's a lot more to it that we don't know and we aren't expecting because of how closely they've kept a lot of stuff to their chest since the beginning.
Mhm. Yep.
So, I think it's gonna be interesting once the trial actually does start, whenever that may be.
Yeah. Yep. Well, I've loved having this episode. Like I said, we're doing this very special series. It's once a month, the final Thursday of every month. We're going to bring you guys a new case. And I mean, I think we're going to do recent cases, but I want to go back. And when I'm talking back, I want to
Mhm.
go way back because when I I mean, I remember growing up with like, Unsolved Mysteries and, all of these shows. And
Mhm.
I remember like hearing that Inside Edition starter, like that music. I remember being young, like, sitting on the couch right after dinner, and my mom would be like, okay, go play. And I remember
Mhm.
things coming out. I'm like, oh, ooh, like I've always been interested in true crime. And it's interesting
See, I was
because
the opposite.
really?
I used that music used to terrify me. I'd be like, "La,
Mm-mm.
la, 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 la," and, like, run to my bedroom because I was so scared of, like, what
Nope.
was gonna come on,
No, I
and
loved it.
now I'm, like, so into true crime. For me, I think for me, what gets me with true crime stuff is I wanna know why they did it. What made what in their brain made them, A, commit the crime, B,
Mhm.
like, think they could get away with it, you know? Like, what in your brain is like, "I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna get away with it." Like,
Mhm.
for me, it's the, like, why and the what ifs and the you know?
Yeah. I think my thing going way back is I wanna know how many it sounds so creepy. I wanna know how many murderers are still out there, like, passing us in the grocery store or driving next to us on the street
That
because
too.
DNA was not a thing.
Mhm.
Evidence was, way different. They went on witness statements and even 60s, 70s, early 50s witness statements. You could literally state you saw something. And we're seeing this a lot with like the innocence projects and innocence files that are
Mhm.
coming out because witnesses would say, I actually didn't see that. Or a lot of
Yeah.
law enforcement were coercing witnesses so they could get a witness statement to put innocent people in prison. And now it
Mhm.
makes me wonder, like, I don't know, I'm that weirdo that I'm at Sam's Club looking at people like, "Oh, did you kill somebody? Because you look like you did in the meat section. What are you doing back
Yeah.
here?" But so
Yeah.
we're gonna do a lot of different cases. Make sure you guys interact on social media and make sure you guys subscribe on YouTube because the videos are gonna be up. If there is a true crime case that you guys want, DM us. Send it to us because we're super excited. We're doing this once a month, and if we start having them flooding in, maybe we'll do more. But it was good seeing you. Idaho 4 is checked off the list. Thanks for bringing me a true crime case that I really didn't know a lot about.
You're welcome.
It
I
was
love this. It was
wild.
so much fun.
It was wild. All right, guys.
Yeah.
Till next time, till next month, we will be bringing this back in March. Send us a message. What do you guys want to hear for March? True crime, true stories, true victims. Let's go.